Hey, Mark here. Today I'm going to start making a new license plate holder for my Polaris Slingshot. What I'm going to do is remove the original stock license plate holder from above the rear tire and move it over to the side, mounted to the lower shock bracket. The first step is to remove the original license plate holder and unplug the license plate light from the harness. I measured the bracket where I'm going to mount the license plate holder. Then I cut two pieces of steel measuring 3 inches by 1 3/4 inches. I cut the pieces of steel out of some 2 inch by 2 inch steel square tubing that I had laying around. Ground the edges just to get rid of any burrs and to smooth it out. Next, I drilled 2 holes in both pieces of steel. The 2 pieces of steel will be mounted with the shock bracket sandwiched in between and with the license plate mount welded to them. Next, I used the 2 1/2-inch square steel tubing pieces and started making the framework for my license plate mount. What I did was make a steel tubing frame about the same size as my license plate, and then I drilled holes lining up for the mounting holes on the license plate. Then I made an angled piece that attached to the pieces of steel that mounts to the shock bracket. I welded all the pieces together, then ground down the welds to smooth it out. The next step is to remove the license plate light from the original license plate mount by removing the 2 1/4-inch nuts that held the light on. I then cut and drilled another small flat piece of steel using the license plate light as a pattern. Then clamped that light mount onto the top of my license plate frame and welded it on. The next step was to mix up a little auto body filler and a little bit of hardener and spread it on the license plate mount to fill in all the scratches and imperfections around my welds. Once the body filler hardened, I sanded it down smooth and then put a coat of black primer on my license plate holder. Once the primer dried, I decided to put on a thin film of auto body spot putty just to make the whole frame look a little smoother. I then put another coat of primer. The next step was to put my final paint coat. I decided to use some dark pewter metallic paint that I had laying around instead of going and buying another can of paint. I put on 4 coats of the paint. The next step is to remove the Slingshot rear body panel that is above the rear tire, so I have access to the license plate light wiring. I then cut the plug off of the end of the license plate wire, and then I added on about a 4-foot long wire and then sealed the splices with heat shrinking tubing. I then fed that extended wire along the back panel of the Slingshot, bringing it out at the swing arm. I then attached that plug to the end of the 4-foot extension that I put on. I then plugged in the license plate light and tested it out. I then replaced that Slingshot rear panel. I then mounted my new license plate holder to the shock brace using 2 nuts and bolts. I then stuck 2 adhesive-backed zip tie holders to the top of the swing arm leading to the license plate holder. I then secured down the wire using zip ties. And my final step was to mount my license plate on my new license plate holder. Besides using some scrap steel, some wiring, and some paint that I had laying around already, I had to spend an additional $5 on the 1/2-inch steel tubing that I bought and a couple of nuts and bolts. I'm very happy with the way this license plate holder turned out.